We acknowledge the traditional owners of country, notably here tonight. We're on the land of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung, people of the Kulin Nation. We recognise Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people as the traditional custodians of the land on which we live and work, and acknowledge that sovereignty of the land we call Australia has never been ceded. We commit to listening to and learning from Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and organisations about how we can better reflect Indigenous ways of being and knowing in our work. I'd like to extend a very warm welcome and appreciation for joining this event, Rewrite the Future, Australia in 2030.
Well, it's a real honour to be here tonight to be able to talk through this incredibly rich but also confronting, challenging, uplifting, inspiring report, which is not just a report. It's really the thoughts, the prayers, the opportunities, the challenges, the sweat, the tears, the blood of both the Climate and Health Alliance, but also over 100 thought leaders that put so much time into bringing together these different scenarios and painting so clearly the paths that we have in front of us as a country and as a globe, and the opportunities and challenges that we face as a global community.
Over a 6-week period last year, we ran 3 Rewrite the Future roundtables with over 100 thought leaders from different disciplines. We developed narratives for 4 possible alternative futures for Australia, from which we surfaced the key elements of a 5th preferred integrated scenario, the future we choose. These 5 scenarios are head in the sand, short memory, looking for love in all the wrong places, we can do this, and our island home. And in our report, Australia in 2030, that we're launching here tonight, these 5 scenarios are accompanied by case studies or day in the life of stories to bring those scenarios to life and situate them in the real world of 2030.
This is the one we probably don't want to have happen, the head in the sand scenario. It's one where we fail to plan, where we don't learn from the challenges that we experience now and that we've experienced over the last few decades. We fail to recognise the science of what's going on around us, particularly from an environment perspective, but also on a social and broader political perspective. We've faced another series of crises over the next 10 years. We can make some fair predictions on the basis of the climate science that we'll be facing another fire or another drought or another extreme weather event, or in fact potentially a whole series. But our failure to plan for this means the costs are magnified, and the consequences of that lead to budgeting within our healthcare system, a healthcare system which remains reactive rather than preventative. We failed to learn from the supply chain challenges that have become much more obvious through the bushfires and then really compounded by the coronavirus pandemic. We failed to learn that our ecosystem is valuable, and we continue to see devastating biodiversity loss and the flow-on effects to our human health and well-being.
So in terms of this scenario, we were talking really about the uncomfortable truth of failure, but also how we are drip-fed narratives to enhance and sustain a short memory. The idea and the opportunity to think loud and long was actually stunning. It was a really interesting scenario where we described the outcomes if we ignored all the scientific evidence and failed to heed the lessons from the past. There are so many good things to draw on in this country, and the view that we have about how we can address these sorts of things are very, very limited. Despite some positive social policy initiatives when COVID first emerged, and that's the job seeker allowance, helping people through addressing the health issues that were really important of the time, many of us are now hearing that the governments don't have any more money, and what we're going to do is quickly revert to small government strategies, ignoring the absolute evidence, overwhelming evidence actually, of social and economic benefit from tackling inequality. So whilst we might be in a stage and age where we are setting up 2030 because of the technology that we're going to have available to us, what it also does though is largely serve upper to middle class urban Australians, leaving many who are producing your food, who are creating your renewable energies, and also then leaving First Nations peoples and communities further behind. Whilst we've got less chronic diseases, we've got more AI that's doing targeted treatment, and although this is really wonderful, it's not actually promoting healthy behaviour. And healthy behaviour has largely been impacted on because the quality of the ecosystems that we derive our food sources from is depleted. It's very expensive, and so those who are impoverished are eating more processed foods.
In this scenario, there is a period of time that it seemed like things were going to happen, things were going in the right way, but we gave up, or something happened, and that was lost. And the power shifted from those who were ready to take climate change on and to do the things we need to do, to people who said, yeah, there's climate change, but we can deal with it with big flashy solar sun reflectors on the planet. We can protect ourselves in glass domes and live inside a bubble. We can still eat meat, but it costs an awful lot of money to produce something that tastes like prawns instead of changing to a healthier diet. And we might even be throwing up sulfate aerosols into the atmosphere, only to find that's eating up the ozone layer, and we have another problem in the kind of solutions that are being proposed. So this scenario gives us a bit of a shopping list for allowing people to say, yeah, the climate is changing, but really remain a denialist about the causes, be resistant to addressing climate change, and instead be reactive, be maladaptive, to do the wrong things that actually hurl us even more rapidly into climate chaos.
This is the transformative change scenario, and Australia is getting on to a stronger and more positive path. We've begun dealing with the big challenges, and we've turned the pandemic, a huge disruption, into an opportunity for our country and for us all. We've committed to a better and shared future. We've adopted the Uluru Statement. We acknowledge that legislative recognition, First Nations sovereignty, is at the heart of where we need to go. We rethink the digital world. We begin to embrace digital dignity. We don't just want the digital world to provide a service to the wealthy few. Notably, we develop a planetary consciousness, and this really is at the heart of the difference we need to make. We need to bring the planet into all decisions that we make, whether we're in government, whether we run our business, or at the household level, the everyday decision making. It can't just be about people anymore. We need to bring the planet in. And this is, of course, at the heart of the way Indigenous people understand their place in the world.
Our island home. One of the headlines for this is that Aussie leaders earn a standing ovation at a global climate summit. Not a position we're currently in, rather the opposite. In our island home, Australia finds its place in the world as a responsible, compassionate, fair country. We begin by acknowledging historical injustices and take formal steps to address this with compensation, expansion of land tenure and water rights. Indigenous voices and knowledge systems guide policy and practice. Our environment and unique biodiversity begins to recover following legislated reforms. A progressive taxation system and increased investment in the commons supports a more equitable society. We invest in truly sustainable progress with measures going beyond GDP. We have a wellbeing budget. We champion truth and accountability, rethink what is needed from technology, and reimagine how we might live. We commit to staying the course.
I just have one question for all of us in the audience as a takeaway. You know, these concepts and challenges seem so big and it can become kind of paralysing. And we understand that a lot of the solutions rest with those in power, wherever they are, Geneva or New York or Canberra. But what can we start doing today as individuals? What can I start doing tomorrow to be part of supporting the 100 experts who've donated time and energy, blood, sweat and tears to creating this report to ensure that we get one step closer to the island home in 2030?
I reckon we just need to move the leadership into the woman's space, to be honest. I think that what we need to do is really celebrate the deep and divine principle of fertility and capacity for nurturance, and to really help men in that process by addressing hypermasculinity, and for us as a society to invite and celebrate the capacity for nurturance from everyone.
I think we've got to reclaim democracy. I think what we call democracy today isn't what it should be. And so rather than giving it up and saying, oh, it didn't work or whatever, I think we've got to say certain media, certain ways of fake information going around is at war with democracy, and we've got to win it. Because if we lose it, we're in bigger trouble than we are. So don't throw the baby out with the bathwater, fight for it.
We're in a period of experimentation. Climate change is a grand experiment. So you should feel confident in participating in a grand experiment to solve it. Give yourself permission to be a leader in that space. There is no blueprint for doing this. We're working it out together.
I think it's really important that we remember that we know much of what needs to be done. It's really about getting on with it.
We're all part of humanity, and humanity is a beautiful thing, and there's never been a more important time in our lives, in our civilization potentially, for us to really imagine that human future.
We believe this scenario describes a future that is possible. That if we proceed with our eyes open to the interconnected and complex challenges that we face, and do this with courage, humility, and the generosity that has characterised our response to COVID-19, that this is possible. That we can employ solutions that offer wide-ranging benefits and set us up well to succeed and flourish into the future. This future is available to us. It's scientifically, economically, culturally, socially, and technologically feasible.